afternoon, everybody. It's 12:30 p.m. on Monday, March 2nd, 2020. We're talking about the weather, Wisconsin weather particularly. Thank you for joining. Let's go right into it. This is the forecast for Wisconsin. It's initialized off of the Wisconsin Rapids site. I haven't touched it lately, but just showing, pretty mild, pretty warm for early March. No big swings one way or the other. A chance here or there for, some precipitation, but nothing major. It doesn't appear at this point. Um, let's go to the next slide. This is the temperature forecast graph. You're seeing that black dashed line there, right near 32 degrees, is near the average. So the 45, up to even 48, and eventually up towards 50 is probably pretty close to about 15 degrees above average at times. But that's a pretty consistent trend. You're noticing that, yes, the freezing line, the freezing at night, it drops below freezing still until maybe later in the week, closer to next weekend. But this is for central Wisconsin, so it does depend on where you live precisely. But yeah, like that, like I said, no major swings. This is a pretty solid, persistent, consistent signal. So when you start to, when thinking about this, you're thinking, okay, there's still quite a bit of snow on the ground across Wisconsin. What's going to happen to that? With temperatures like this, you're going to see a very, not a, you're going to see a steady snow melt, and you're going to see it disappearing relatively quickly. This is what it looked like last year at this time, March 2nd, 2019, the snow depth, and then this is what it looks like this year. I wanted to share that with you because last year we had flooding issues, and we probably will still have some this year. This is 2019, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as it was last year. Again, we'll see how it goes. You're looking at on the left there. Okay, so we'll start with this year. We're looking at on the left the snow depth in inches, so 10 to 25 inches across northern Wisconsin. Less than 4 inches generally, but maybe more consistently 2 to 4, 2 to 6 across west central Wisconsin. And then there's spots there in southern Wisconsin that have more, but overall it's kind of like holdy, and it's not a very solid blanket of snow. So there's holes and gaps and things, and it's a little bit easier to overcome on a regional scale. That the as opposed to a big solid blanket of snow or a glacier, So that's good. Now we look back to last year. You're seeing that you don't have those holes and gaps across southern Wisconsin. Everything's pretty well covered. Again, going back to this year again. So yes, and then the other thing to look at is the water equivalent within the snow. So the 2 inches of water equivalent across southern Wisconsin compared to last year is about half. In many cases, you're seeing it's about half of what it was last year. So that's that. And then here, we're looking back again. This is 2019. We're looking pretty close to the maximum for the year. So this is when you had the most snow on the ground, and the end of the cold, so to speak. You still had a couple more days of cold weather here at this point last year. If you go to 2020, you're seeing like today we're pretty much done. Like there's not going to be enough snow coming to fill this back in once it melts. This is the end of this winter probably, and that's what the maximum looks. So you're looking at here at the maximums, and last year was definitely a large maximum. I think I made the comment earlier in the week or maybe last week where I felt like the snowpack was very kind of prone to melting rather quickly. It's superficial. That was a word I used. And by that I mean, a few warm days and it's going to be poof, gone. You might still have the snow banks and stuff like that, but effectively, I guess it makes a big difference going forward. This is the temperature records from last year. You're seeing highlighted in yellow. That's March 3rd through the 9th. You're seeing there on the 3rd through the 7th, I believe we had a snowstorm in that time frame. You also had a pretty big cold outbreak there on the 4th. And then things warmed up progressively from there. And then by the 14th, you're up towards 50 degrees, obviously rising between 40 and 50 by the 14th last year. This year, again, you were going right into it. Okay, we're about a week ahead of last year with about half the snow. So my point is that this year seems to be not as bad as last year. Okay, now let's take a look at the Green Bay max temperature trend. I call this the climate graph because it kind of puts everything into perspective. The box labeled 1 there is showing a trend there from October to mid-December of basically near to below average temperature, sometimes very below average. You're seeing those spikes there in that gray shaded colored area is basically +2 or -2 standard deviation. So that's within that gray zone is where you would expect normally to find the temperatures. When it gets outside of there, then that's a pretty significant thing. So you had two pretty cold spikes there in early November and mid December. Maybe a day or two, nothing long term, as you can see. But then somewhere in late December, things turned. It went, everything just kind of flipped from one mode to the other all of a sudden. And from that cold trend turned into above average trend. And it didn't, so that was kind of interesting. The black line, let me see if I can draw on this here. Oops. This black line that you're seeing, it's kind of the same with the other ones, but that's the 5-year average trend. And if you zoomed in closer, you would see the 30 year, and you would also see last year, kind of all the same color in there, but you'd see those in there basically. But anyways, you're trying to follow this black line, generally speaking. And so what this tells you is that, yes, okay, so from October through mid-December, your temperatures are below what the 5-year, so below what it has been recently. And then from December, late December through February, almost now into March, temperatures have been warmer than what they've been recently. That's what that tells you. But yeah, so what is the relationship between 1 and 2? What's causing that? And then the other thing to note, and I'm sorry, I kind of drew a box right through with my point here, but right here, this black line, you see it jump way up. That looks like around the beginning of March over the last 5 years. There is a trend there around this time of year. That's when temperatures turn. That's when things tend to warm up. But because this year we're talking about a winter that has been mild on the average, you're jumping from basically average to really high levels. And so, but anyways, I guess my point is that you're not having to melt off as much snow. You're not having to deal with as much of cold weather at this moment, and that's allowing temperatures to sneak well into the 40s and if not 50s here soon. But yeah, but anyways, this is kind of on schedule. And it's also interesting to note that it's almost like winter got pushed back, or sorry, winter started earlier. I'm looking at this thinking backwards, like to the left, but it started earlier, and then it kind of was a mild thing after that point. And so we seem to be kind of ahead of schedule a little bit. I don't know, something I noticed. But anyways, so what's responsible for this? That's my question. I mean, what happened here in late December that all of a sudden we went warm? And when we turn it over to, when I overlay the AO index, okay, we're going to go back and forth here a couple of times. You're going to see prior to that, that time frame there in late December, you're seeing kind of a near neutral, if not below average at times, AO index, and then after that point, it's been all positive, consistently positive, and your downtrends have been still positive. So, yeah, I mean, when you go take a look at that, it goes, okay, that seems to be a connection there. It could be coincidental, but I have reason to believe maybe that these two things are related, and perhaps the Arctic going into this mode is what caused that. So here's the latest AO reading. You're seeing that basically to March right here is where we are at right now. That red line is kind of the forecast, and you're seeing that more continuation of the normal or the recent trend from, I guess, January through February. You're seeing more of that still. Some members, you can see that one red line kind of going beneath 0 down to -2. That's one of many simulations, but most of them seem to be keeping it on the positive side. So that's what we're going to stick with for now. You're seeing, I mean, that's a pretty consistent simulation. We talked about that a lot in the last video. If you're not familiar with it, here's the Arctic Oscillation. Now, when it's in a negative phase, if we go back, see, we've been positive since January. When we're in a negative phase, you're seeing more amplification of that pattern. You're seeing movement from poleward movement. You're seeing it going up like this, and you're seeing it go down like that. When we're in a positive phase, these wrinkles in here are much smaller, and the flow is a lot faster from this along this way. Basically, it indicates a strong Arctic oscillation pushing south on the jet stream, or just a flatter jet stream in general. Because if it were, let me correct myself here. Not necessarily pushing further south, just being stronger and more bottled up. Okay, and I think in our case, it ends up making things warmer in Wisconsin as a result. because you don't have these big, high pressures working their way down like this. You kind of have just a little bit of nothing, a lot of nothing going on for the most part. In my opinion, I mean, I'm looking for storms. So here is, we showed this on the last video, I'm going to show it again. I think for February, so here you're seeing the months, and this is organized by winter year again. So basically 1 January, 2 February, 3 March. We don't have any data yet for February, but I'm going to guess it's probably around 3 or a little above 3. And you have to go back to 1989 and 1990 to see similar values at that time of year. Most recently, I know that 2019 had a positive AO in the second and third months of the year, but it's not the same magnitude. And I'm sure last year you had dips there below zero into the negative category. And then you'd have to go back to probably 2015 to see a similar magnitude positive AO this time of year. And then 2011, which is an interesting year, we saw that positive AO all the way into April. And then at the end of April, it just shut off and actually flipped back into negative by June of that year. So, but if you look at 2011, you're seeing a lot of amplification in that pattern, similar perhaps to 2020, where you're seeing a negative 1.2 there in November, and then a big positive spike here most recently. So the other thing to note is it doesn't seem like, not always, but it doesn't seem like not always do we go straight from one to the other. It seems like once you're in a positive mode, it seems to kind of linger on. So like, for example, 1989 and 1990, you're seeing that from February through into April. Yeah, it tends to be positive because of that big spike there right at the beginning of the year. Okay, yes. So that's what I'm thinking, is that as we go through this spring, we're probably going to stay stuck in this positive AO pattern. I don't see anything right now that indicates it's going to change out of that. But this is a really helpful view. This really kind of explains the whole process of the AO going on here. All right, we're going to talk the MJAO real quick. This is my forecast a week ago. This is what it looks like now. So we keep flumming back and forth between there. You're seeing that I think we're going to be pretty close to what I forecast there for phase 4, but where it seems to be changing now is sort of bending away from 5, trying to go back into the neutral circle. But we have several days before that happens, and we'll see about that. Phase 4, so for the next week, I think our pattern is going to be dominated probably by phase 4. Not dominated, I mean, there's other factors, AO for one being a big, huge thing, but if we're thinking about a tropical signal, it looks like phase 4 is not really all that interesting. Here you're seeing on the left side of your screen, sort of just kind of not really strong signals one way or the other. I mean, how could you make a map around that? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But anyways, temperature forecast. Don't trust this blue in here. I think this is mainly a warm pattern for the United States, given what the Arctic Oscillation is doing. Again, so now let's go back into this. Now let's pretend for a second that we don't stop here at the edge of phase 4 and we go 5, 6, and 7 for later on in March. What would that look like? Again, I don't know about phase 5 here. I think Arctic Oscillation is probably going to stop this from happening, that cold signal, but then it may amplify this warm signal here in 6 and 7. So you could end up with blowtorch warmth here in the end of March, but that should be accompanied by greater than usual, greater than normal precipitation trends across the central United States, perhaps. I mean, that's what the tropical signal would suggest, and I think that's sort of what the AO would probably say too. Okay, now let's switch over to the other thing we want to do here. This is just me. This was just me getting my graphics together. Let's talk about what this looks like visually on a mapping thing here. I mean, we got the analogs here showing. This looks like forecast hour 192. Let's go back a little bit. So that we're looking at 5-day blocks from starting here now, valid at 12Z Saturday, March 7th. So that's several days from now, but basically kind of showing what it's been leading up to there. Yeah, so that's the 5 days prior to the 7th. So basically this week. This pattern is sort of, I don't know, I mean, the way I look at it is a little bit more zonal. You have a little bit of a signal that there might be a little bit of a trough here. But then as you go through time, it kind of shows that negative P&A look again with a big positive anomaly here across the United States. But overall, I mean, and then it kind of backs out of that. And it doesn't really do anything with it. It doesn't escalate. It just kind of, I know that with ensemble forecasts like this EFS, you're going to have towards the end of the forecast period, things are going to tend to revert back to a seasonal norm. But as we go again, going to go back towards this week ahead, I just don't see a whole lot happening with this pattern for Wisconsin. It seems kind of boring. As we go take a look at the temperature anomaly forecast and these same 5-day blocks, so starting today, kind of ending on the 7th, so that's Saturday. What does this look like? And then I'm just going to go forward in time. This is, again, surface temperature, what you're feeling when you walk outside. Anomalies being positive, being warm, warmer than average, and nothing really challenging that over the next week or two. And we're here all the way to the 17th of March. So the first half of March is now looking like it's going to be warmer than average for a good portion of the United States. Again, I don't know if that's going to switch off there at the end of the month. I mean, maybe. Anything can happen in March, late March and April. Still, you can still get massive snowstorms, as we've seen. 2018 happened in April, and it was sort of like a similar boring March, early March, I guess. And my forecast is still that it's going to be wetter than average across Wisconsin, but I switched that cold signal to a warm. When we go take one more look closer at the GFS operational model here, just showing what that kind of looks like in terms of precipitation and otherwise low pressure systems. You're seeing that there's just nothing really coming together. You do have systems drifting by. Therefore, I guess that would be the Wednesday, Thursday time frame. You're seeing a low pressure system working sort of out of the continental area, but not really a lot of moisture with it, not taking it anywhere. And then a high pressure sweeps through and Sunday. And then again, it does have a storm now here for Monday, Sunday time frame. And we'll have to watch it. We'll have to see how this works out because that will put Wisconsin in the warm sector. So if this happens as progged, I haven't looked at the European yet, but if that happens as progged, it's going to be an interesting feeling because we really haven't had so much of this. At least not last year did we even have in March a system that tracked with warm air coming up from the south. And this could turn temperatures into the 50s or 60s even. We'll see about that. But that's next weekend. But yes, usually this time of year when it gets warm, that means it's going to rain or something at some point. It's almost like a compromise a little bit. Never really get out of that scotch free. And then as you go into next week, a little bit quiet there for most of the part. And then by the time you get 2 weeks out from now, another system, and then probably another one in there somewhere. So I think what's going to happen is here over the next week or two, it's kind of boring. We'll see how the system ends up on Sunday, Monday time frame, what that ends up doing. If it draws in enough warm air and moisture to produce thunderstorms or something like that, or if it tracks further south, we'll see. But I think that the action's probably going to be on the second half of the month for Wisconsin based on what I'm seeing from the Arctic Oscillation and the MJO at this point. But yeah, that's what I got for you. Thanks for watching, and I will keep you guys updated. Bye.